Welcome to another segment of Working with Others. Are you ready to take it to the next level? To covey and beyond. Shifting from powerless to powerful. I noticed in our discussion board on meetings that we had a mixed bag. Many of you were still struggling with meetings because the solutions you offered were in fact for the leader to have an agenda or for the leader to redirect people who were going off focus. And I had challenged you to figure out what you could do as a participant. But at the end, I noticed so many of you were just feeling there was no changing your meetings. They were always going to be that way. So I wanted to address this, and I wanted to say that our goal has always been, from the beginning of this class, for you to regain your power. And you have been doing that. You have done it with distractions. You have done it with setting real dates and times. You've done it using positive language instead of negative language. The I can instead of I can't. The I will instead of it's too hard for me. You've taken your power back. You've chosen positive thoughts like driving on the way to work. Some of you have been practicing that. Choosing to focus on things that made you feel good, which meant that when you got to work, you were oozing something very different than if you'd been worried all the way to work or focusing on what's wrong with the other drivers. Your thoughts create the oozing, and everything and everyone responds to the oozing, the body language that comes from the inside out. And then the last segment, listening. Using the talking stick method, which you didn't have to actually use a stick, the upshot of that was just hearing someone out and repeating it to them in a way that satisfies them. What I didn't tell you is that ultimately, if someone feels heard, they will be more willing to listen to you. So, let's try this, a simple observation. The first thing I want you to do is think of one difficult person that you deal with pretty regularly. Well, that was easy, right? To find just one person. Limit it to just one person for this exercise. I want you to think about that person just for a second. And you're probably having some feelings with those thoughts. So, if we had that one difficult person and we had this continuum from one end to another, we would put that difficult person way to the left there, because that person is not bringing you joy. That person seems to have power over you. Now I want you to think about a baby that you've held recently, or when your children were babies, or a puppy, or a kitten, or some other lovable creature that just gives you all kinds of warm, fuzzy feelings to think about. Got it? Good. That one we would put way over here to the right. That thought, that person makes you feel good. Makes you feel maybe appreciation, maybe just pure love. Did you feel emotional whiplash when you did that? Going from the one extreme to the other? Well, if you didn't already, you may in a moment. Now I'm going to challenge you to create your own work team, even with that difficult person. So, here's your task, if you choose to accept it. We're going to try to move the difficult person all the way up to the feelings you had about the baby or the puppy or other lovable creature. Well, at least somewhat closer. How, you ask? First, we have to start with where you are. In other words, I don't want anyone to try to suddenly think positive thoughts about a difficult person, especially if you've had a history with the difficult person. Then you will shift to just a little better thought, and then you will watch as the magic happens. I can't explain the third part, but I know it works. Ready? To do this, we have to start where you are. So how are you going to do that? Well, first, I want you to list all the qualities that annoy you. Now, your tendency is going to be to want to list the things that they did. And that's okay if you need to start there. But ultimately, what we're going for is the quality that you are feeling that they have that makes them an undesirable part of your team. So, if my issue was, this is my example, he says do one thing, then holds me responsible for another, the real upshot is he's a double talker and he's confusing on purpose. I think that that's his quality. He's trying to be confusing and obfuscate things. I might have another issue. He's out to get me. I'm the fall guy. That quality would be malicious and deceitful. He lies. So how are we going to shift that? You say, oh, that doesn't make Well, gradually we shift it. So we start with one good thing about that person that we can honestly say. One time I did this in a face-to-face class, and the student, the only good thing they could think of for their person was that the person had good breath. And it worked. It still worked for her. So whatever you can honestly say nice about that person will work for you. You have to start somewhere. So my example was, well, I can honestly say he is very involved with his employees. Of course, I'm still thinking involved in a negative way, right? I could also say he is very cognizant of legal issues, and that could be a good attribute for a company, even if he was using it for evil purposes. I can honestly say he's pretty detail-oriented. He really watches, he crosses his T's and dots his I's and watches the details. So now I'm feeling just a little better, even though I just listed things I already knew. He says, do one thing, then holds me responsible for another, was my complaint. Now I want to try to shift that based on the good things I just said. I could say, well, he is trying to cover all possibilities. He does want to please his bosses. He cares about his job. He wants to be successful. I'm sure others think I'm confusing sometimes. I want to be careful too. It must be hard for him to try to achieve two different things just to keep his job. So in other words, I concluded on this particular case that this person was actually receiving the conflicting information from those higher up. And he was doing his best to try to make sure he covered both objectives at the same time, even though now, my other complaint, he's out to get me, I'm the fall guy, he's malicious and deceitful. I started thinking maybe he was afraid he'd lose his job. He probably sees it as protection and not evil. I saw it as evil, but he's probably just trying to protect himself. He wants to succeed and thinks this will make him look good. It must be awful to feel so insecure. I've been tempted to lie to protect my job before. I'm glad I didn't do it. No job is worth having to cover up lies. I feel sorry for him. I'm glad I am free of that worry. Well, I have a totally different take on this difficult person at work now. I have compassion, feel a little sorry for him, and I definitely feel that I'm in a better position than he is. So now, how are we going to watch the magic? I'm going to ask you to submit your work on your person. You'll do the same thing I just did. You'll start with the things that bother you. Try to get to the qualities you think that you're objecting to. You will then try to think of at least one good thing you could say about that person. And then you'll try to shift your complaints to a more compassionate, understanding, even forgiving place. When you submit your work, I will give it a grade, but you'll also get a discussion board that you can use to report what changed. You'll have to give your classmates a little background information because they won't see the assignment, and you will decide what details you will share with them and what you won't. You may share more in your assignment than you will with your classmates. And now I wonder, are you feeling better already as you see that this can happen for you? You have a lot more power over people than you think. Of course, we can't change people, but there is such a thing called the Pygmalion effect. As you talk to them in a certain way, as you point out what they are doing right, people tend to respond to that and watch them change right before your eyes. Good luck. This could be the most important tool that you have in your belt.